African Safari is a nature documentary filmed in several nations in modern-day Central Africa. Released by Crown International in 1968, the film was originally completed in 1962, a collection of footage from 5 years in the life of its director, photographer, and star, Ronald Shanin. In Deepest Africa, an adventurer documents his journey across the continent. He shares the highlights of his day job, capturing live animals to deliver to zoos and museums around the world. He travels through all the terrains that Africa's heart has to offer, from the hunting grounds of the King of the Beast, to the snowy peaks of the Mountains of the Moon, the source of the River Nile, to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro and the edge of its volcanic heart. One of film's earliest uses also represents one of the earliest styles of exploitation film, the travelogue, introducing faraway lands, creatures, and peoples to eager audiences, with no need for a plot, just breathtaking images. And as movies caught on, these documentaries brought all the corners of the world to the silver screen of civilization. African Safari's focus on its narrator and his face-off against the wilderness fits the archetype of the great white hunter from the jungle action subgenre, where a man from the West would put on a pith helmet and trek through a savage jungle in search of big game and high adventure. But nature documentaries would evolve in the 40s and 50s, such as when Walt Disney launched his True Life Adventures series, in which the cameras were focused on the animals almost exclusively, the films finding the personalities and stories through them. By the 60s, TV programs and films from such people as Jacques Cousteau, David Attenborough, and Marlon Perkins had a more reverential view of nature, not conquering it, but rescuing it, protecting it from the impact of civilization. And that attitude affected the narrative in African Safari as well. Now, our narrator's still a skilled trapper, but he catches them alive to share these animals with the world. He's handy with a rifle, but he's not in the jungle for trophies. He carries medicine for the tribesmen and plays with the wildlife, caring for them, even saying that baby bottles are among the most useful tools in his kit. When he does hunt down a lion, it's at the request of a local tribe who has lost too many cattle from the predator's attacks. So what makes this movie an exploitation film? Well, it may have the most on-screen deaths of any film in this series. And yes, they're animals, but this is a documentary, meaning these moments in the circle of life are not staged. You got crocodiles thrashing baby deer, lions tearing into antelopes and wildebeest and zebra, birds of prey swooping down or snatching their targets in midair. In the first 10 minutes of the film, there's at least 6 on-screen deaths. Animal lovers, be prepared. Our intrepid explorer gets in on the action. There are 3 sequences of him catching poisonous reptiles by hand. And he comes face to face with several big game animals, with his last and most dangerous moment starting at minute 48, in search of that rogue lion. That's one of the film's highlights. 2/3 of the way through, Safari is mostly done with the animals and focuses on exploring the terrain itself. There's a cartography project that leads him up the Mountains of the Moon, starting after minute 50. And starting at minute 63, he leads a small crew up Mount Kilimanjaro to film the interior of an active volcano. There's some brief nudity, but it's of the National Geographic variety. In 1968, this movie was rated G. Our explorer interacts with many different tribes, and the most positive thing I can say about that is he distinguishes between the Maasai, Pygmies, the Bantus, and others instead of blending them together. But the people of the region are treated as much like exotic oddities as all the animals he encounters. It's Africa shown through the lens of colonialism, and that might be enough for some people to pass on this film. I can't say how much of this was from Shanin and how much was from Crown International. Shanin assembled the original documentary, Rivers of Fire and Ice, and self-toured it initially, lecturing with each screening. He sold enough tickets to catch the attention of Crown, who bought the rights and made some changes, such as replacing Shanin's narration, recording another actor, and passing him off as Mr. Shanin. Crown also retitled the film as African Safari, presumably an easier sell. Re-released nationally in 1969, African Safari would become one of Crown's most successful releases ever, and a rare award winner for the studio as well. Crown wouldn't stay in the documentary business, or even the Ronald Shanin business. Over 10 years after completing Fire and Ice, Shanin would independently bring more of his African adventures to the big screen in 1974's Touch the Sky, at a time when African Safari was still in distribution worldwide. There are decades of nature films and TV shows available now, entire cable channels dedicated to the animal kingdom. African Safari's age helps to distinguish it from the pack, as well as possessing a touch of savagery in its presentation that may be more than a little bit of ballyhoo. On Mute, Shanin's scenes with locals seem at least a little more respectable. African Safari has collected some amazing images and moments to share from long ago and far away.